UFC 290 goes down on the 9th of July in Las Vegas as featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski defends his territory against his most dangerous opponent to date, Yair Rodriguez, in the main event. In the co-main event, former foes Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja take each other head-on for the third time in their careers. Plus, we have a mouth-watering middleweight title eliminator between Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis, among other exciting fights on the main card and prelims. Who will come out on top come fight night? Let's find out. UFC 290 kicks off with a lightweight fight between Kamuela Kirk and Esteban Ribovic. Kirk has been fighting in the UFC since 2020 and holds 3 wins and 2 losses in the promotion, whereas Ribovic recently had a losing start to his career in the promotion against Loic Radzhabov. Both fighters are very well-rounded. Kirk is a grappling specialist with good hands, but Esteban is a better striker with capable grappling qualities as well. On the mat, it may well be very even, with Kirk trying to go for takedowns and Ribovic stuffing most, if not all, to keep the fight on the feet, where the Argentinian will have the edge. We think Ribovic will be able to keep the fight standing and outstrike Kirk to win a decision or earn a TKO stoppage. Next up is the flyweight fight between Shannon Ross and Jesus Santos Aguilar, and there's really not a lot to discuss in this one. Ross is a super entertaining and tough fighter, but he lost at Dana White's Contender Series and was finished in under a minute in his UFC debut, so there's not a lot to expect from him, especially considering that he's 12-7 in MMA. Jesus Aguilar offers a lot more. He scored an impressive victory in Dana White's Contender Series, but unfortunately ran into the highly rated Tatsuro Taira in his UFC debut. Aguilar is a well-rounded fighter, but grappling is his bread and butter, and he will be looking for takedowns and submissions for as long as the fight lasts, which we think won't last long. We think Shannon Ross won't be able to stop Aguilar's takedowns and will get submitted early. Christian Rodriguez versus Cameron Saaiman is a banger on the early prelims between 2 fine bantamweight prospects. Rodriguez most recently derailed Raul Rosas Jr.'s hype train, and he'll be looking to put Saaiman's off track too, but it'll be a much tougher fight. Saaiman is a Dana White's Contender Series graduate who is 2-0 in the UFC. He is an exceptional striker who is known for his power and aggression. 5 out of his 8 wins have come by way of knockout, and he's still undefeated. Rodriguez is 9-1 in MMA, but he's very well-rounded, with 3 knockouts and 4 submission victories. On paper, Saaiman is the better fighter, but in truth, there isn't a lot of gap between the two. Saaiman has a lot of power and he's slightly better on the feet than Rodriguez, but the latter has the ability to mix it up and make things extremely tricky for the South African. We are expecting a very close fight, with Saaiman winning a razor-close unanimous or split decision. We really don't see either man getting finished. Vitor Petrino versus Marcin Prachnio is too good of a light heavyweight fight to be on the early prelims, but that shows just how stacked this card is, and we truly deserve it after a rather below-par UFC 289. Vitor Petrino is a light heavyweight prospect to keep an eye on. He is 8-0 as a professional with 6 stoppage wins. He signed with the UFC after impressing in Dana White's Contender Series, and made a successful promotional debut against another tough prospect, Anton Tukalj, in March. Marcin Prachnio is a major step up in competition for the Brazilian. The Pole hasn't had a lot of success in the octagon, but he's a very capable fighter on the feet and can shut your lights out if you're not careful. Petrino is an exceptional striker as well, who packs a lot of power behind his punches and is extremely hard to deal with in the first round. Since he's oozing with confidence, we expected Petrino to come out all guns blazing, which means Prachnio will have to rely on counterattacks and try to avoid the early onslaught. The longer this fight pans out, the better for the veteran. But we think Petrino's pressure, power, and agility will earn him an impressive victory in this one. The first fight between Jimmy Crute and Alonzo Menefield ended in an unfortunate draw due to a point deduction for obstruction at UFC 284 in Australia. The 2 fighters will run in back hoping to right the wrongs and to understand who has the advantage, where in this fight, we will have to take a look back at their first one. The light heavyweight contest between the 2 at UFC 284 was a back-and-forth contest, with Menefield punishing Crute on the feet and Crute using takedowns to turn the tables on his opponent. In the 3rd round of the fight, however, while Crute was going for a takedown, Menefield held onto the cage to avoid getting taken down, and therefore, he had a point deducted. Menefield was ultimately taken down, and Crute finished the fight in a dominant position. The fight was ruled a majority draw due to the point deduction, without which Menifield would have won by a split decision. Will their rematch be any different? We don't think so. We think it plays out the same way, with Menifield having the better of the striking exchanges and Crute using his wrestling to avoid getting punched in the face. Ultimately, we think Menifield will be better prepared for Crute's takedowns this time around. And if there is no point deduction, he'll win. But it's really a close one to call. Yasmin Jauregui versus Denise Gomes should be the people's main event because it's a banger of a fight that isn't getting the love it deserves. In the blue corner, you have Denise Gomes, who most recently flattened Bruna Brazil in April. And in the red corner, you have one of the hottest strawweight prospects in the UFC, Yasmin Jauregui. Both fighters are knockout artists, who love to let their hands go. Gomes has 5 knockouts in 7 fights, and Jauregui has 7 knockouts in 10 fights, so we are assuming this one won't go the distance. Jauregui is more of a boxer, and she loves to walk her opponents down. But so does Gomes, a Muay Thai fighter with a very diverse skill set. On the feet, it's a very even fight. But Jauregui has a slight edge due to her wrestling and takedowns. This one is very close, but we give Jauregui a slight edge. It'll either be a knockout or a closely contested decision victory. Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena is your typical grappler versus striker welterweight contest, and the one who'll manage to impose his game will win. It's as simple as that. Maddalena is yet to lose in the UFC and is coming off 4 first-round finishes, which is not good news for Brady, who most recently got finished by Bilal Muhammad of all people at UFC 280. Now, this is not a smack on Muhammad, but Maddalena hits a lot harder, and if he lands a clean one on Brady, he'll drop another fight that'll crush his confidence. For Brady, takedowns and grappling will be key. He will have to shoot for takedowns, but on the feet, it's pretty much a mismatch. The question is, can Della Maddalena stop those takedowns? Maybe not, but he's a hard man to control on the mat. It's a very intriguing fight, but we think Brady has his work cut out for him in this one, especially with his confidence low after his first career loss. Former UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler will make his final walk to the octagon when he squares off against Nico Price in the final fight on the prelims. To be honest, we really want Lawler to sign off with a win, which would obviously be a perfect end to a legendary career. But we don't really see it happening, especially keeping in mind Lawler's recent run of form. He only has 1 win in his last 6 fights, and that too against a Nick Diaz even everyone's grandma could beat. At 41 years old, Lawler is way past his prime, and we are happy that he's riding into the sunset. Nico Price is a really tough final fight, however. That man is violent and still very much in his prime, so he will turn it into an all-out slugfest, which may not end well for Lawler. Robbie can catch him with a big punch too. He still has a good amount of power in his hands, but we don't see him beating Price. We are hoping that our prediction for this particular fight ages like milk. Our heart says Robbie, but our mind doesn't really agree. Bodine Nakal is back, ladies and gentlemen, and he will kick off the main card against Tression Gore. Bo Nakal is arguably the biggest name among prospects in the UFC, thanks to his legendary career in wrestling. As far as MMA is concerned, Nakal is pretty inexperienced. He only has 4 fights in total and 1 in the UFC. But beyond that, he's a 3-time NCAA Division I national champion. So he's really, really, really good at what he does. While his wrestling is final boss level, he's constantly improving his striking as well at the American top team. And he does have significant knockout power, but so does Gore, who will have a slight advantage in the striking exchanges, especially with his one-punch knockout power. Gore also has solid BJJ skills, but as soon as Nakal gets his hands on him, he's going to show that there are levels to this game. To be very honest with you guys, Gore doesn't have anything more than a puncher's chance in this one. Nakal is expected to run through him using his wrestling, and we suppose he'll earn a first-round submission again. He's simply a far better wrestler than most of the guys in his division. Jalen Turner recently suffered his first defeat in a while against Mateusz Gamrot by a split decision, but other than that, he's had a solid run at lightweight, with tons of good wins, whereas Hooker hasn't had an ideal past few years, although he did manage to bounce back into the win column in his most recent fight against Claudio Puelles, a grappler with little striking threat. Jalen Turner is different. He's a big lightweight, who is a solid striker, and he hits pretty hard, but so does Hooker, so if the fight stays on the feet, it'll be a very intriguing matchup. On the mat, Turner has the edge. He's the better wrestler, the better grappler, and his submission game is pretty underrated. Turner is 5 years younger and has fought less than Hooker, who's had quite a lot of wear and tear over the years. All in all, Turner is the better fighter, and he will inflict a lot of damage on Hooker to win this one, but we really won't be surprised if Hooker catches him with a big shot. If a world where Israel Adesanya doesn't exist, Robert Whittaker would be a dominant champion in the UFC middleweight division. That's how good Bobby Knuckles is. Since moving up to middleweight, Whittaker has only lost to Adesanya, but he has taken out every other top contender, and when he steps inside the cage at UFC 290, he'll be looking to derail the hype train of another rising star who is oozing with confidence. South Africa's Dricus du Plessis is on a roll, with his most recent win coming against Derek Brunson. And if he beats Whittaker as well, he'll be the next in line to face Adesanya, and that's a guarantee from the champion himself. Beating Whittaker, however, is a huge ask. The Aussie is arguably the most well-rounded fighter at middleweight. He is one of the finest strikers in the division, with exceptional boxing, perfectly disguised kicks, and solid in-and-out movement. The Reaper is also an exceptional wrestler, who's impossible to take down. I mean, Yoel Romero couldn't take him down. What makes anyone believe du Plessis would do it? That only means that du Plessis and Whittaker will take each other head-on in an all-out striking battle. And what a battle that would be between two of the best strikers in the division. Whittaker doesn't need any introductions. We all know how good he is when he gets going. But du Plessis is an exceptional kickboxer himself. He's a former world champion in kickboxing and has won the middleweight title in 2 of his past promotions, with his only loss coming at the hands of Roberto Soldic, one of the best middleweights outside of the UFC. This kid is not an average fighter. He is very high level, and we really think he's going to give Whittaker a run for his money, whether he wins or not. We think it's going to be a very close fight, maybe a split decision or something like that, with Whittaker's experience getting him the win on the night. We are really excited about this one in particular. Brandon Moreno has quite an intriguing history with Alexander Pantoja. The Mexican has lost to the Brazilian twice, first at the Ultimate Fighter, and then years later in the UFC, when he was cut from the promotion and then had to impress outside to make his way back to the promotion. In both fights, Pantoja dominated Moreno with his grappling. In their first, Pantoja submitted Moreno, and in the second one, he beat him by decision. Their second fight was 5 years ago, and Brandon Moreno is a much better fighter today than he was a few years ago. The Mexican has come leaps and bounds, and that's the worry for Pantoja. Moreno is a much harder cookie to crack these days. He doesn't get taken down easily, is a fantastic wrestler and grappler himself, and on the feet, his pace, pressure, and power are very hard to tackle for anyone in the division. Pantoja's grappling is some of the best in the division, and he's a very capable striker as well, but has he improved as much as Moreno? We don't think so. We think he's in for a real surprise if he thinks he's going to fight the Brandon Moreno from 2018. Having said that, we still think Moreno won't be able to blow Pantoja away. He's tough as nails and will put up a great fight. But at the end of the day, Moreno is simply the better fighter now, and he will avenge his defeats with a comfortable decision. With that, it's time for the fight you all have been waiting for. Alex Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez is going to keep us on the edge of our seats for as long as it lasts. It's a fight between 2 of the very best fighters in the UFC featherweight division, both of whom are in their primes. Volkanovski doesn't need any introductions as his resume speaks for itself. He has beaten the best in the divisions, including 2 GOATs in Jose Aldo and Max Holloway, and he's quite literally levels above everyone else right now. The Aussie is one of the best strikers in the UFC, with lightning-fast kickboxing and thunderous knockout power in his hands, and with a background in wrestling and rugby, he's very strong as hell. That only means it'll take a special effort from someone to beat him. And when we say special, we mean the most electrifying featherweight on the planet, the pride of Mexico, Yair Rodriguez. El Pantera is known for his flashy kicks and looping punches, but in the past few years, he's improved his ground game tremendously as well, since he's now submitting world-class grapplers. Like Volkanovski, he doesn't have a lot of holes in his game, but there are still areas where Volk will have the edge. As good as Rodriguez is with his unpredictable and somewhat audacious kicks, his boxing is not as good as that of Volkanovski, whose in-and-out movement is some of the best in the game. So if Volkanovski closes the distance and engages in a close-range boxing match, he'll have a lot of success. If for some reason Volkanovski decides to stay at range, Rodriguez will pick him apart with his kicks. But we don't think Volkanovski is stupid enough to give Yair space to maneuver. Maybe the champ will mix in a takedown or 2 every round to slow the Mexican down. Rodriguez doesn't have a great takedown defense, so that'll be a great strategy, although Volk should respect Rodriguez's submission threat. All in all, we think Volkanovski has the edge in almost every area, and he'll get his hand raised with a decision. But we should expect a banger. So that's how we see UFC 290 playing out. What are your predictions, guys? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.